All right, well, hello and welcome. We, the Legal Geeks, are happy to be here with you at the San Diego Comic-Con to celebrate Star Trek's 60th anniversary. Diving into the law of the Genesis trilogy, with legal issues almost as explosive as the Genesis device itself. We have assembled an incredible crew of judges and lawyers for you today, so let's get started with introductions. To my left, we have the Honorable Steve Chu, the Honorable Stanley Boone, the Honorable Judge Danna Nicholas, all of our judges in the room, and then attorneys Mark Zaid, Christine Geek, and Joshua Gilliland. Steve and Josh would like to share a couple memories.
Thank you. So, dim the lights, or it'll be easier to see. Let's have a story to tell. Star Trek means a lot to all of us, and it helps people through traumatic experiences. There are a lot of great stories about people that have recovered from horrible things. For me, from February 21st, 1990 to March 18th, 1990, I was hospitalized from emergency surgery because of Crohn's disease. I was misdiagnosed for 5 years. The doctor thought I was anorexic and sent me to therapy. It was not an issue of weight loss. It was an issue of I was dying. And 2 nights after yesterday's Enterprise aired, I was hospitalized. The odds for dying were significantly higher than living. It was, at the time, a no-win scenario. Now I see it as part of my tapestry. My godmother set a very high bar for godmothers. Her sister was a florist in Beverly Hills and came to the stars. One of her clients was Leonard Nimoy. So, the godmother's sister called Nimoy's assistant and said, this young man's in the hospital. He spends his days recovering, watching Wrath of Khan and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he signed a get-well card and sent it to me. Now, part of my motivation for getting better was to get out and see The Hunt for October that aired or premiered March 6th, 1990. I did get to see it. But let's fast forward to 2009. So it's a year after I got to see Montana. Nimoy spoke at a legal conference. And I was in the first 3 rows and went up to go shake his hand and just say, hey, thank you. When I was a kid, I nearly died. You sent a get-well card, and I just wanted to say thank you. And since the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, I started to move away because there were 900 people behind me. His hand came down on my shoulder, so I know what it's like to get the Vulcan attention. He stopped me 3 times. He asked detailed questions. He was gracious. He was sweet. And he was very humble. And he said, I'm very glad I did that. So, Trek helps people. You don't have to go far to see anyone in a ICU or any other horrible situation that someone could be recovering from, because Trek is good at helping others recover from traumatic experiences.
Good job, everyone. We've got 6 panelists today, so we're going to have to move at warp speed, so let's get started. Mark, did Kirk violate the civil rights of Khan and his genetically enhanced superhumans by exiling them involuntarily?
Okay, so as everybody remembers, after Khan and the crew of the Botany Bay tried to take over and kill the crew of the Enterprise, they left them on Ceti Alpha V. Now, Khan wasn't too upset about it. He was going to rule in hell rather than serve in heaven, as his quote was. And then we come to learn that in Star Trek II, Ceti Alpha VI explodes, and Ceti Alpha V becomes this barren wasteland with this frickin' little eel creature that will be talked about later. And obviously, a huge danger. It killed most of Khan's crew and his beloved wife, who was an original Enterprise crew member. So we started to think about it, reckless endangerment aspect. right? And think about you're in a fight with your boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse, and you kick them out of the car. Not while it's moving, you stop, then you put them out there. There's a big difference whether you left them at the shopping mall where they can call an Uber or a friend versus a desolate highway in the Everglades where alligators are walking around. Now, in Maryland, where I'm from, it's not a crime in every jurisdiction. It may fit in different categories depending on the situation. But recklessly engage in conduct that creates a substantial, that would be a key word in any determination, risk of death or serious physical injury to another. So I guess if you just get a minor injury from someone who happens to be driving by, that might be okay in Maryland. And then other factors that will come into play would be, was there a conscious disregard, a gross deviation from other standards that might exist, and again, going back to the substantial risk. And there could be a misdemeanor in some jurisdictions, a felony in others. I started to think of the military mutiny, back with Captain Bligh in the 18th century, where they kicked off the crew and they left them, but they were inside of an island and they had food and they had water. But even then, the crew members who mutinied were court-martialed and some of them were sentenced to death. As I finish on this, the one thing really that strikes me, I think they're fine. The crew of the Enterprise is fine, not illegal in what they did. Someone should have probably visited in the course of the 15 years. I want to know more about the crew of the Reliant not realizing there was a missing planet in the solar system, so they couldn't figure out which Ceti Alpha planet to go to. Someone told me it's answered in some book, but I'm only focused on Star Trek.
Thanks, Warren. Judge Chu, which book was that mentioned in?
That particular one, there was one. There were a couple about Khan story. We're going to go down a rabbit hole. The one question I was waiting for Mark to yell, Khan! Maybe next time.
Oh, well, Judge Chu, let's discuss the legality of the Genesis.
So this, even in the 23rd century and the 24th century, if we're going into the next generation, overpopulation, famine, sickness, disease, although they are sort of cured on Earth, it's still a problem. And we still need planets, places for people to live. So we have the Genesis device. It is actually a form of terraform, taking planets where you cannot live, Class D type of planets, try to turn them into Class M planets, planets that can sustain life, human life, or human-like life. The amazing thing about Genesis, though, is it is doable not in years or months, and this is explored in many different science fiction franchises. We've got Aliens, Weyland-Yutani is terraforming LV-442, and we see it in many other contexts as well. On Star Trek, the Genesis device will do it in hours instead of months, instead of years. But there's a little side effect. It turns out that if used where life already exists, it will then destroy such one in favor of its new matrix. So what is the quote? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. This is a pretty good example of that. Certainly, these are created with the best of intentions. Scientists who barely want to work with the military. And their amazing project can now be turned into essentially the mega weapon, the weapon of mass destruction of the 21st century. As Spock says, it literally is Genesis, but McCoy sees the downside is universal Armageddon. And they have one of their famous McCoy-Spock arguments. One of the last ones we get to see, unfortunately, but it's wonderful to see. Now, turning to the legality itself, there are not a lot of historical comparisons for this, except for really the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. So the most powerful weapon that has ever been unleashed in wartime upon the human race. The purpose was very different. It was not a benign purpose. We were not trying to create life. We were trying to destroy it. It was an arms race, and it did effectively, it was happening during World War II. This has been famously documented, of course, in the movie Oppenheimer and other stories, but it's simultaneously inspiring and sort of concerning. Inspiring because so many amazing scientists, many of the greatest minds in history, got together and achieved so much in so short a time. However, their creation was used to such destructive capacity, the likes of which we've never seen. So, you can look at it both ways. Again, you have a Spock and McCoy kind of view of this. The way in which it was regulated led to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, the first of its kind. Because again, we're in uncharted territory now with the atomic bomb in the nuclear age. But what we have happened historically is the countries come together and decide to self-regulate because they don't want to spread nuclear weapons. And this involves a pretty remarkable agreement because you have countries that already have nuclear weapons, and they agree not to share their technology with any other country that's trying to develop nuclear weapons. The countries that do not have nuclear weapons then agree to be limited and to not try to develop their own nuclear weapons. And the countries who already have the weapons are grandfathered in as of January 1, 1967. That's the USA, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, and China. 5 countries have nuclear capabilities. The non-nuclear states agree we're not going to develop nuclear weapons. That has been the way that we have regulated this type of destructive power for the last 60 years. Again, the first of its kind. Star Trek does not have an exact analog. The closest, I would be very impressed with. Does anyone actually know this? Can anyone think? Star Trek The Next Generation, 7th season, The Pegasus. In there, you get a reference. Will Riker's first command, his captain says that he alludes to a treaty with the Romulan Empire under which the Federation agreed not to develop cloaking device technology in exchange for peace. Same arguments, people say, well, that hamstrung the Federation, but it also kept peace. Again, controversial, but that's probably the closest analog we have in Star Trek.
Thanks, Judge Chu. Christine, tell us, does the insanity defense apply to those with the Ceti Alpha V deal wrapped around their cerebral?
So Chekhov and Terrell, if he had lived, would be facing serious charges because they have aided the enemy in various ways, and that charge is potentially punishable by death. So since they're Starfleet officers, I'm going to start with the U.S. Uniform Code of Military Justice and just ask everyone to assume for now that the Uniform Code of Justice that is referenced in the show is similar. So under the UCMJ, lack of mental responsibility is an affirmative defense that requires the accused to prove by clear and convincing evidence that at the time of the offense, the accused suffered from a severe mental disease or defect, and as a result, was unable to appreciate either the nature and quality of the acts or the wrongfulness of the acts. So if the Uniform Code of Justice had similar procedures, these issues could be raised in a proceeding called Rule 706 Board, which is a mental health evaluation that can be ordered under Rule of Courts Line 706, when there is reason to question whether the accused lacked mental responsibility at the time of the offense or is currently mentally competent to stand trial. The board members have to be either a physician or a clinical psychologist, and they have to make certain findings, which include findings on requirements for the defense. The UCMJ standard is high, and it would be difficult to meet. A severe mental disease or defect includes psychotic disorders, but under the RCM, it would not include minor disorders like non-psychotic behavior disorders or personality defects. The nature and quality prong asks whether the officers understood what they were doing, or, for example, whether they believed that they were pointing their phasers at tribbles rather than their fellow officers. And finally, the wrongfulness prong asks whether they had the ability to understand that their conduct violates society's rules. So here the eels are said to wrap themselves around the cerebral cortex, and it renders the victim extremely susceptible to suggestion. But while suggestibility tends to show that the person's ability to control their conduct was impaired, courts have understood the current test to eliminate the use of assertive volitional impairments. Also, Chekhov and Terrell appear to be in mental anguish as they're trying to resist Khan's orders to kill, which suggests they do understand what they're doing and can't do what's wrong. So even if the charges don't get dismissed at this stage, that doesn't mean Chekhov couldn't raise the offense at trial. He could also look at whether any of the evidence shows that he could not have had the required mental state for whatever crime he's ultimately charged with. And finally, to wrap up, unlike the UCMJ, certain other jurisdictions do retain some type of volitional test. So if you don't assume that 23rd century law mirrors the UCMJ standard, and we instead imagine that it looks more like a law in these other jurisdictions, then a defense that Chekhov was unable to control himself might have better chances.
Mark, was Starfleet's order to not discuss Genesis lawful?
Folks, I'm sure you remember when Kirk is trying to get back to Genesis because of what Dr. McCoy's situation is with Spock's Contra. Admiral Morrow tells him, "You are all under orders not to discuss with anyone your knowledge of Genesis." Now, this one actually is a straightforward answer. In my day job, I'm a national security lawyer. I represent spies. I represent military. I do courts martials every once in a while. But I have a security clearance. I'm not allowed to tell you what level. I can kill all of you in the audience. It's not a good Comic-Con for sure. But we're going to assume that Starfleet is a military organization. It's obviously a combination, but we've seen episodes where there were courts martials and they operated very much like they were a military organization. It could be like the Department of Health and Human Services Commission Corps, which also has military ranks, even though they're civilians. But assuming they are operating, whether under either arrangement, when we look at it in today's world, without a doubt, that type of order would be a lawful order. They sign secrecy non-disclosure agreements. Any of us who have access to classified information, the government decides what is and is not classified. Lots of stuff is over-classified. We fight about that in courts all the time. We sign certain forms, an SF-312, a standard form. That's for collateral security clearances, secret, top secret, or an SF-4414, which deals with SCI. You might hear it as TSSCI. And the Espionage Act, which goes back 100 years, is probably still in effect in the Star Trek years as well, because it won't go away. It talks about national defense information, which isn't even classified because that term didn't yet exist. So if it's closely related to the national defense, I think the Genesis would. Not available to the general public? Presumably not. The executive order that's in effect now, back to President Obama, Executive Order 13526 classifies military plans, weapons systems, or operations, scientific, technological matters relating to the national security, all of which could affect or apply to Genesis as well. And there are those, I didn't find a lot of details, there are corollary application in Starfleet regulations. They have top secret directives, they have clearance levels 1 through 10, whatever that might mean. So this would be an easy one that, yeah, Captain Kirk and the others, to the extent they talked about Genesis to anyone, would have violated Starfleet regulations and laws.
Josh, tell us about the necessity defense and its application to disobeying orders and destroying the USS Enterprise.
So there's a lot of Star Trek where orders are interpreted broadly. And there are other times when, yeah, we're just not going to do that. So Star Trek 3 is the pivot point where Trek really focuses on it's a family. The only thing Admiral Kirk knows is that the logic-based society has a faith where McCoy now has Spock's soul. McCoy's life is in danger. Both of them are suffering, and Kirk can't go back to Genesis. So everyone decides to engage in a conspiracy and destroy their careers. That's what families do. All right, we'll take one for the team here. Now, how do you defend that as a lawyer? Well, the only thing we know at this point is McCoy's life is in danger, but we're going to need a Contra expert to explain how much is he in danger, because it has to be immediate. There has to be this timestamp on it of we have to do this because it's the only thing we're going to do. So we're going to steal the Enterprise and everyone's comfortable with prison. That's incredible. We then get to Genesis and the Klingons are waiting. So the ship gets disabled. And I fell in love with that design when I was 5. My dad took me to see the motion picture at a drive-in. The ship represents hope. Is watching her die like watching hope die? It's a weird feeling because that's the last trick Kirk has. The Klingons fire on Enterprise. They find out that the Grissom has been destroyed. Kirk hears an order to kill the hostages. There's the attempted murder of Lieutenant Savick, and Kirk hears his own son die. The only thing Kirk knows is we can't let them get this ship. It has state secrets, and they will kill all of us. Destroying the ship is the only option. It's defendable. And it is a fighting chance to live, because at the end, that's the only thing that they have. And watching that great lady die is a reminder of why history will never forget the name Enterprise.
Judge Booth, was Admiral Kirk justified in seizing the Klingon murder threat?
Well, after what Josh just said, I go.
To take our ship, we'll take
Yeah,
our
why
ship.
not? There you go. Let's go for it. What do we got to lose?
100 viewers.
Yeah, losers weepers. Yeah. That comes back to Federation law.
Have you put that in any decisions?
Yeah. Look us up. We might have some pop culture quotes. So what it comes down to in this analysis is somewhat of the Federation law. But what is the Federation law? Is it an amalgamation of a variety of laws, or is it the Federation? I think the best example is to look at maritime law. Ship on ship. Oh, take my picture, sir.
We don't do this in state court.
Anyway, we look to maritime law. What is it? It's ship on ship, right? But there are some problems because Admiral Kirk did take a ship that was to be decommissioned. It wasn't. It was not yet decommissioned. He was not under orders per se, don't take this decommissioned ship out and create havoc. He was not under that. But the interesting aspect is, what was the nature of the Klingon ship? What status were they in? Was this an event the Klingons had authorized? In other words, was this an act of war, and therefore Admiral Kirk was justified in his conduct under maritime law? Or was this an act of piracy on the part of the Klingons as a result of their conduct? To me, the analysis comes down to it was an act of piracy. There is nothing to suggest in the record that the Klingon had authorization from the Klingons to destroy a Federation ship first. Again, although Admiral Kirk didn't really know that. I'm not sure why they didn't figure that one out, but nevertheless, he did not know that. So even in an act of war context, he would have been justified in terms of seizing that particular ship. At the end of war, he would have had to turn it back. If it's an act of piracy, all bets are off. You can take Klingons on over to the Enterprise, blow them up, you're good. They're not prisoners of war. It's an act of piracy. You can seize the ship. So in my determination, it was an act of piracy by the Klingons, and therefore Admiral Kirk was justified in taking the Klingon ship.
Does he get to keep the ship?
See you later.
I told Star Trek Picard was part of the Geordi's museum, right?
Right.
Judge Nicholas, the good old choice of law question. Federation versus Klingon law at the start of Star Trek 4, which one would prevail?
Yes. Okay, so imagine this, it's starting 2286. The Klingon ambassador comes before the Federation Council to petition for the extradition of the Enterprise crew to face extradition and execution under Klingon law for their actions related to the Genesis project. Okay. But before I get to the topic, I'm so super excited. This is great. I don't want any of you to miss anything. So please now take out your phones and your cameras. You're not going to want to miss this.
I thought you didn't do this in state court.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want you to miss this. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce to you the one, the only, the incomparable William Shatner. No, it's just a... So, taking a look at our poll, was the Klingon claim for extradition of the Enterprise crew valid? All right, and I know the internet's slow, so we can have a show of hands. How many people say the legal answer that almost always works? Maybe. How many people say no, the Kittimer Accords were not signed until 2293? Okay. And then finally, yes, governments with diplomatic representation can always ask, but that is a very good split. So to answer the question, first we look at the laws that govern the types of extradition in the United States. What governs interstate or intrastate transfers is Article 4, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. So think full faith and credit clause. Think the Fugitive Slave Act, which is a zombie law still on the books. And then when we think about external between different agencies, we look to 18 USC 3184. And all of that is treaty-based. So it's kind of a general framework. It doesn't really fly the plane. It's like air traffic controllers. We just tell the planes where to go. And in this framework, we'll see that any federal judge, that's not me, that's these guys. There has to be a treaty or a court, and then any federal judge can look at the sufficiency of evidence to sustain the charge of the agency or the country or entity that's trying to get extradition. And then they may issue a warrant for extradition in accordance with that treaty. But that's only if they want to. There's no mandatory language there. So the answer to the question is no, because in my estimation, the Kittimer Accords were not signed until 2293. But that doesn't foreclose the possibility of the Federation releasing criminals to another jurisdiction after they've satisfied the Federation's sentence. But because there are future episodes of Star Trek, we know that didn't happen.
Judge Boone, tell us, is it legal to park a herd of
I think you've all answered this. I mean, like, I don't need to take a survey. If you've ever parked in San Francisco, per se. Let me just say that my views do not reflect the views of the federal court. Anybody else? So, I mean, here it comes. I mean, this is a billboard attorney's dream to have this bird of prey land in San Francisco. You've got a variety. Let's skip federation law. Let's just look to federal law, because, you know, the nature of federation, you still accept the jurisprudence of the entity, you know, the country, etc. That's the way it's been done in Europe for many, many years when you have federations, Swiss, etc., German federation. So, first of all, you're going to have federal law. You're going to have the FAA. They're not going to dig it. There's going to be a variety of violations. The NTSB will be out there. You're going to have Clean Air Act problems because you were in a particular area that was not authorized to land. Therefore, you create a problem. You may have clean water problems, and you know, anybody knows the zoo's right there. You're going to have some problems with Endangered Species Act for sure, because I suspect by landing that bird of prey, a few endangered species will have died in the filming of that event. California law, it's same analysis in terms of but I think the worst one would be the city of San Francisco and county, because they will assess fees, etc. How do you get this out? Then they'll do it by weights, etc. It'll be tied up in the administrative procedures, and then they'll stick you for cleanup. So my suggestion is the analysis is no, you can't park the bird of prey. Go to Marin County. Then you can.
Christy, Chekhov's interrogation. Tell us about when your real name and your ID look fake.
So if a person is detained or arrested and they tell the officers their true name, rank, and service number, and then, without giving them any more information, ask, am I free to go? Their defense counsel might be hopeful that the interaction wasn't too damaging. Unfortunately, the rest of this conversation really does not go well for Trevor. He does tell the truth. The problem is that no one in the 20th century believes him. Kirk actually anticipated this kind of issue when he told those in uniform to remove their rank and insignia before leaving the ship. So, setting aside the fact that this happens on a base, there's a few categories of laws potentially implicated in these encounters like this. One is stop and identify laws, which require an individual to identify themselves under certain circumstances and impose some kind of consequence if they don't. Obstruction statutes that criminalize and willfully obstructing a peace officer in their duties, and laws that criminalize false statements or falsely identifying yourself in a particular context. So an example of a stop and identify law is the Nevada statute at issue in the Heigl case. That law required individuals to identify themselves by name, and it was used as the basis for a conviction under the state's obstruction statute. In Heigl, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected Fourth and Fifth Amendment challenges to the stop and identify law, so long as the stop is supported by reasonable suspicion that the person has engaged in some kind of criminal activity, and that person, under the circumstances, had no reasonable belief that disclosing their name would itself be prohibited. The court did acknowledge some constitutional limitations. Under the Fourth Amendment, the detention has to be valid in the first place. Under the Fifth Amendment, if there's a reasonable belief that disclosing one's name would be prohibited, that might take the place outside the law in Heigl. And the law can't be so vague that it provides no standard for determining what a suspect has to be complied with it. In California, by comparison, there's an appellate court case that upheld a conviction under an obstruction statute alone based on the arrestee's refusal to provide his name. In the Karuga case, the defendant was under arrest for a felony and refused to give his name in a booking interview. This was a fairly narrow ruling that distinguished the routine booking interview from the earlier stages of the encounter. The court reasoned that in this context, if a person refuses to identify, it's impossible to do things like arrange for bail or conduct an arraignment, and those inabilities impede the administration of justice. Another type of law to watch out for in police encounters like this are laws that criminalize giving false information, which can include a false name to law enforcement, such as 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, Public Penal Code Section 148. Here, Chekhov has neither refused to identify nor made false statements. His mistake was to write information that 20th century authorities won't recognize as real and have no real way to confirm. But given his other activities on the base, this is probably going to be the least of his concerns.
Judge Chu, what were McCoy's duties, if any, as a doctor to save the woman with kidney failure?
So Dr. Leonard McCoy, one of the most colorful characters we have in the original series. We know he's one of the finest doctors in Starfleet. Cue the classic quote, "Damage him, I'm a doctor, not a insert," whatever description of the day, the adventure of the week.
That is in one of your orders, I know.
Maybe, yeah, but so he time travels.
Citation on YouTube.
So, Dr. McCoy, this is like Spock McCoy, right? This is their revenge for all the arguments they've lost, right? So,
Give him the side.
McCoy travels back to 1986. Who has not wanted some magic pill that could cure all of their ailments? And in this particular scenario, what we have is a patient with kidney dialysis that McCoy runs into at San Francisco's Mercy Hospital in the Mission District. This lady, we don't know much about her. He runs into her in the hallway. We know she says she's in end-stage dialysis, so her kidneys have ceased to function very well. Kidneys are the organs that clean your blood. If they do not function, you typically have to rely on technology or a machine to clean your blood. So this often can be the harbinger of severe organ failure, even means death. Doesn't look like she's doing very well. McCoy, in his classic fashion, says, "What's the matter with you?" Great bedside manner. She says, "Kidney dialysis." "Okay, well, what is this, the dark ages? Take this pill and call me if you need anything." And he walks off. What does this pill do? Miraculously, it regrows an entire new kidney for her. And she's ecstatic, and if you slow this down and listen to it, which I have, you hear the doctor saying, "It's a miracle, she's regrowing a new kidney, how did we do this? This is unprecedented." So this is wonderful, right? It plays for laughs, it's humorous, and again, you would not want a magic pill. Now, what I never thought of as a kid watching this, and now, after defending doctors in medical malpractice cases, I automatically wondered, how do you play with his legal responsibilities? On the one hand, to all doctors, people are familiar with the Hippocratic Oath. There is a modern equivalent to that. Essentially, people believe it says do no harm, and it does, but it says more than that. More specifically, the modern oath says apply for the benefit of the sick. All measures required. So try to help people. There's also the Geneva Declaration, the pledge to save humanity. The health of the patient will be my first consideration. So this is, again, a doctor should be inclined to help people. So McCoy's probably following through on his oath. But we have, in the other direction, a more strong General Order 1, the prime directive, who are not to interfere with the natural events, the natural course of events of the world. So, and in Star Trek, we later learn about the temporal prime directives. You get this in The Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine. Is McCoy violating the prime directive, or more specifically, the temporal prime directive, by saving this woman who's suffering kidney failure with a magic pill? Anyone say yes? Raise a hand. Oh, okay. All right. Anyone say no? McCoy's good. He's in the. Okay. So I guess we have a lot of McCoy fans here. What would most likely happen? I think that he is technically violating the temporal prime directive, but in legal jargon, it's de minimis. This is a lady who is probably close to the end of her life. She's probably not the next Khan Noonien Singh. She's not going to tremendously affect events. So the temporal agents will probably visit McCoy and slap him on the wrist, say, all right, don't do it again. McCoy will say, sure. And then the next episode, he'll do it again.
Judge Nicholas, can you violate the Marine Mammal Protection Act?
I know. And I'm going to speed through this really quickly because we really want to get to your questions. But to me, this is the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So whip out those phones again. Did Spock harass Gracie within the meeting of the MMPA? No, he might know that with her. All of those in favor of option A, no, she was already in a research and aquarium facility. Raise it high and proud. Okay, all right. B, unsure. I need more information on marine mammal law. Okay. C, yes, mind melding constitutes harassment under the statute. And D, no, Spock acted respectful. Well, let's kind of get into 16 USC 1362, and it identifies what actually constitutes harassment of the animals. So if you think level A, it's your entry level harassment. It's the things that would cause that it's an active pursuit or torment, or just generally annoying the animal. Go to the next slide. See, like if you're that's really what the Section 8 is. And then we get to our higher level, which is level B harassment. And that's anything that disturbs the animal's natural behavior, their pattern. If you abandon it or cause something to alter it or deviate it, then that's a level B harassment. And what's important about that is it's up to $20,000 per violation and up to a year in jail. So if you do this, some jurisdictions and some prosecutors will charge it for each animal. So if you can imagine $20,000 per mammal, that's quite a bit of money. All right. And then our next poll here, should the Klingon bird of prey be forfeited under the MMPA or should the crew keep it? All right, all in favor of yes, forfeit the ship, the law is the law. Okay. No, they saved the earth. Give them the ship. No, it's government property. Yeah, people keep it the ship. And then maybe it depends on whether the whales consented to time travel. Well, the answer is yes. The MMPA allows for forfeiture of any vessel used in violation, even a Klingon bird of prey. So I would refer to USC 16 USC 1376.
Around 10 minutes for your guys' questions, so would you like to line up? I believe it's a procedure. All right.
That's
Hands,
okay.
then.
I can write.
Yes, go ahead.
So when you're talking about the question of McCoy treating the patient in the hospital, what about medical malpractice? Though she didn't suffer injury, there was not really informed consent in this treatment for her.
Good luck with her trying to find him.
Under Cobb versus Grant, the California Supreme Court has ruled on the scope of informed consent. And the There is a question, did she consent? Yes, she took the pill. But did she know what the pill was for? That may be where there's a little bit of gray area. As a that's the legal, 10,000 square foot view. The more practical question though is, let's say the next week her newly grown kidney starts malfunctioning. She wants to sue McCoy. Where is she going to find it? It's long gone. At best, she probably sues Mercy Hospital, and they're going to have a heck of a time trying to track down McCoy. Technically, should she have a cause of action? Potentially. Practically speaking, it's going to be pretty hard to prevail there.
I think they're going to have a hard time finding an expert.
On what kind of pill that was?
The kidney.
Yeah, the kidney respawn pill. Yeah.
Interesting down here.
Yes, go ahead.
What do you think of the legality of Section 31?
All right, that was the first. All right, good night.
All right.
What do you think of the legality of Section 31?
So Deep Space Nine is where they're introduced. It's the super secret government spy agency within the Federation. And they're bumping people off. It's dark. And the issue is it's highly incompatible with the Federation values. Can you have that? We have spycraft all the time. We find out when they fail. Don't find out if they're successful, because 9/11s don't happen. So can you have spies that are making those type of decisions? Technically, no, but you have a right to defend the country. And Martin, I think that's enough of a foundation for you to take it from there.
I would definitely represent any whistleblowers who wanted to come forward against that. And no, I mean, look, the agencies are not allowed. There could be presidential authorization for things like that. And there are some examples in our own history with respect to that type of conduct, but you can think of Iran-Contra and it's still prosecutions, even though the president had authorized the sale of arms to the Contras in Nicaragua. But it certainly, as Josh says, would go against what the Federation speaks to. So, I mean, I guess, not to be political, but I guess Donald Trump is right. There's a deep state even in the 24th century.
We see the introduction to it in Enterprise. You see it again in Discovery, where like they have full-on fleets, and that's just weird. They have control, which is their AI that eventually gets shut down. So the idea that, yeah, we're going to have a central intelligence agency, not having one pre-World War II, I think was problematic. And so, because we, as our country, we were not cool with that idea. After World War II, we got very comfortable with having spy stories.
I think also the very existence of the organization is not necessarily illegal. What they do if they cross the line, I think it becomes a case-by-case question.
Yeah, bumping off wrongly government officials.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. My question is, considering the organs would be actually illegal within the Federation, do they actually have any human rights? Or rights the same as Federation citizens, considering that Carl's a war criminal, the others might be war criminals, and their existence is basically illegal within the Federation.
So we're talking.
Wouldn't it be okay just dropping them off, anywhere?
So the Strange New Worlds has done a nice job talking about augments and their issues, and whether or not you could actually ban people from being in Starfleet on the basis of augmentation. One of the issues with Commander Una is this idea that just because she has a genetic heritage that gives her enhancements is not a reason for throwing her out of the service. It took us a very long time for women to be permitted in combat. It took us a very long time for African Americans to be permitted to be in the military, starting with the Civil War, and then segregation, and then President Truman integrated the military. It took a long time for women to be fighter pilots. So the idea of saying we're going to knock out an entire class of individuals because we don't like their background is an odd one. Now, we don't know the full story of the eugenics wars. So there's a reason to say we don't do genetic enhancements anymore, but do you discriminate based upon that? I think that's a bigger issue.
I think part of it also will be from where you're from. I heard an accent, and you might have a different view. Our ancestors, you have to think back to World War II. In the end, the Brits and the Soviets just wanted to execute all of the Nazis, just line them up against the wall, done. The United States advocated for the International Military Tribunal. Everyone agreed. What we don't see at the end of Space Seed is a trial. Now, it's pretty obvious they're guilty, and they would have no doubt been convicted. Not that I'm prejudging. But there wasn't any. They just declared punishment right then and there. So they could have maybe they have a civil lawsuit against that.
Yes, gentleman in the blue shirt.
Here's an article. I don't know if you guys know where, what is your
Two Vicks?
Yeah.
Okay. So did Janeway kill two Vicks? Yeah, she did. Is that okay? No. Were there other options? Yeah, duplicate him, then separate them. So do the Riker maneuver.
That's something we all learned in law school. Tuvix does present an interesting question because the creation of that life, it was created by the destruction of two other life forms. So you've got three different life forms now claiming a right to life. How do you decide? And that's what Star Trek does so well. They ask the question to which there is no right or wrong answer. It's about how you get there, right?
It's like the premise of Paul's Ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Captain Kirk liable for back child support?
No. Is Kirk liable for back child support? Let's back up. He did not abandon David. Carol, in this exchange with Carol Marcos, he says, I did what you wanted, I stayed away. And Carol did not want her son to follow his father's footsteps. As the only
And you know, that was my dad's argument too.
Okay, and being the person with any type of family law, and I have 18 months of it. No, I think that he potentially could be, right? And so it just depends on when she filed, where she filed, and whether or not he had reason to believe that this child was there, and then whether or not she received any type of services from the government. Did she receive any Federation childcare or daycare to make any of those claims? Because if she did, I am so sorry, Kirk. You owe some money.
At a minimum, could have helped him with his hair. That was the biggest tragedy in it.
Yeah, that's what I What a scarcity society.
She said at this time it's a money-free society, right? So does that change anybody's analysis?
Star Trek's claim to be a money-free society is actually very good in principle, but in practice it completely breaks down in every episode they try to explain. We just want to press London, Deep Space Nine. You know, Karn, when he tries to explain to Ruby in First Contact, oh, how much does this cost? Well, the economics of the future are different. Well, how? Well, they just are. And then if you read Star Trek role-playing games, you know, from FASA, they actually give pay levels for the different ranks. Why do you need pay and credits if there's no money, if the economics are different? So I think that there's still money. It's just Star Trek doesn't really know how to explain it.
I mean, if I was Kirk's lawyer, I would raise it.
Oh yeah, economics.
No question.
Right. You was nothing. Yeah.
Very quickly, yes.
If the Enterprise had seized the bird of prey in space international strait, would it be actual piracy or actual armed robbery in space?
Well, you know what's interesting about that, because remember the Klingon was going to the neutral zone, and what is the effect of that? And you have to look to the equivalency. I still think it's an act of piracy, by the way the Klingons acted, and therefore Kirk was justified in doing what he did because it was just a sheer act of piracy.
I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Ridley, good job.